Good morning for those of you who joined from India, and good night actually for those of you who joined from US. Let me start off with a prayer. Shuklam Bhagavatam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyaye Sarva Vighnopashante Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvadha Sadike Sharanye Trambake Devi Narayani Namostute. All right, the ironies of ironies is that this morning happens to be a Sunday morning in India. And my mind goes back to the Sundays many years ago, last 45 years. And the picture that I'm sharing would be my mother, and that would be me, my two brothers, struggling to drag us to the church. And she had to be there by 9:30, so we all had to cooperate. That would be one Sunday. Probably that would be the Sundays. And that was the church that we would be trying to go to. And I'm thinking about many Sundays like this. A Sunday where all three of us children are lying on the bed, sick, puking, throwing up. My mother is tending to us, and there are people coming and looking through the windows and just going off. Another Sunday would be where the church meeting is over and a lady is waiting for me to talk to her. She's waiting to have some kind of a personal work. She happens to be my Sunday school teacher. She wants to know what are all the sins I have done in the past week. That would be another Sunday from days ago. And another Sunday would be where I had to take an exam. I was studying for this exam, but that was a Sunday. I had to be in church. And I'm nervous. I had to go and take an exam. If I didn't take that exam, I'm going to lose one full academic year. But there was no way I could take an exam on a Sunday, not with a dad as a preacher. So that would be another Sunday. And another Sunday evening would be where my mother is lying motionless. She's sick and she's fainted. And I don't even know what's happening. It's almost 9:30 in the night. I'm running up and down, and my neighbor happens to be a doctor. So in desperation, I'm running to find where the doctor is. I don't know what to do. My two younger brothers are sleeping. This would be another Sunday. I'm a new bride. I just got married. I'm in my parents-in-law's, and I'm just walking up and down, and my husband is asking me what happened. What are you nervous for? I said, oh, I need to go to church. This is a Sunday morning. He said, yeah, there's a church down the street. Let's go there. I'm saying, no, this is not the church. I had to go to my church. He's like, what do you mean your church? Yeah, there is my church and I had to go there. That would be another Sunday. And fast forward, this is just 5 years ago. It's another Sunday where my mother just had a knee surgery. She's immobile. She's lying on the bed. And my two sons, one is 10 years old, the other one is 6 years old, or maybe even younger. And it's 12:30 in the night, and I have a morning flight to take to go to Coimbatore to see my parents-in-law. And I'm just, my son is asking, oh, what do we do? Mama is not well, and who's going to take care of us if we leave? I said, and that would be another Sunday. What is striking in all of these Sundays is that in all of these instances that I talked about, my father is missing in the scene. My father, who took to Christianity and who was the reason why we were into this Christian fold, is the one who's missing in action on all of these Sundays. And from there, I got to, let me share. This is a Sunday, again, this happens to be in 2018, just 2 years ago. And this is the next Sunday, this was just 4 months ago. And now let me start my story as to how I got away from those Sundays that I described to these Sundays where you see me completely differently. And it's not an easy story to share because it's my personal story, but this also has the story of my family, my friends that probably won't like to be talked about in a public forum. But the nature is my story is interconnected with the story of many that were part of my life, part of my journey. I apologize to those of you who are hearing me. And if I had to put you in bad light, it's not because I intentionally doing it. It's because as I tell the story of my life, since you have happened to be part of my life, your story comes out too. All right. So how did we get into this Christianity? Were we born Christians? I don't know. I was not born a Christian. And my father was the one who got converted to Christianity when he was an engineering student in Hyderabad. And I think he was going through a personal crisis where one of his friends committed a suicide, and he was desperate looking for answers, and he walked into this church, and that's how he got into this church. And we come from a very simple family. My grandparents are simple farmers in in the northern part of Andhra Pradesh, like closer to Vijayawada and things like that. But my father was the first generation uh, engineer who came out to Hyderabad to study. So he was by himself in the big city, and obviously he was lonely and he was going through a lot of stuff. And there is a recruiting method that these churches follow. They come and to the hostels where they stay, and like in the evenings, and that's how he got recruited. And somehow my grandparents in the village heard about this they kind of came to know that my father is something was amiss. And the village elders told him that, oh, if you go to the village, a lot of people will catch your son, and they might get him married off to some city girl, and you will lose him forever. So while he was in his third year, they decided to conduct his marriage to the girl of their choice. So that's how they got married. So my mother got married into this family, and she I don't think she had any clue as to what she was getting into. But she's a woman. My parents were my mother was from a very simple family, but very cultured. She comes from a very small family. And since my father was still studying in the college at the time, even though she couldn't move to Hyderabad at the time, she moved in to my grandparents' house in this small village. And my mother comes from a very small family, but my father's family is quite huge. They have 6 brothers, and so she just got dumped into this family. But I don't think she ever complained about being part of this family. She really loved the people, even though her husband was away and he was coming once in a while. She still found a home in my parents in my grandparents' house. And I think the she learned a lot of stuff from the village, and she had a lot of stories to tell when I was growing up. And my grandparents were somewhat of rich farmers. At the point when my parents were married, they had upward of 20 acres of land, and they had cattle, they had cows, and it was a, a higher middle class village family. And I was born in 1974, almost 3 years after their marriage. And in 1975 is when my mother moved to Hyderabad to stay with to join my dad. And it's just not that she came with me, because my father got this good job in Hyderabad, and my grandparents said, take all your brothers there to study with you, to to get some kind of an education. So my mother pretty much moved with her entire village. So my first memories of a family would be not just me, my dad, and my mother. It would be just me, my dad, my brother, my uncles, my aunts. Like we had about 20 people in a house. That's the first memories of what my family was. And then after almost 5 years, I had a younger brother, and then one more. So till about I was 6 years old or 7 years old, we really didn't have. I didn't have much memories of anything that is happening to the church. We just got up in the. We had a very Indian kind of life. I mean, we were very grounded in our culture in some sense. We used to go to church. My mother, Sunday morning probably was the only time where we all, like a big gang, went to church. It was just a social thing. But my father was very involved in the church, but my mother was too busy. She had this big family to feed, and she had her the my parents' my father's brothers, sisters, and all those things. So till about 7 8 years old, the impact of the church was not much. And my mother, since she moved to Hyderabad, even though she was going to church, but she was not one of those neo converts where you kind of get initiated. You have to go pray, and you have to do this, you have to do that. She did none of those things. So she really didn't have any solid background in Christianity per se. I mean, I can't even recollect seeing my mother reading a Bible. And everything in that church was almost like in English, but we were very grounded in our culture, Telugu. So we didn't even know what they were saying half the time. And my father was my parents were so grounded in Indian culture that they actually put me in a Telugu medium school when I first started school. So it was like two different worlds. Nothing was common about what was happening in the church and what was happening in our house. I mean, to just give you some examples, all of these people in the church were very fashionable people. They all spoke English. They all wore some Western clothes and things like that. But my mother would dress us as very conservatively, and it is a situation where she never accustomed to this Christian world, and there was really not much pressure to accustom to the Christian world. But once my uncles and all moved out, and we started coming back in just as five of us as family, then the pressure started where we had to just get more close to the church. We had to understand what is happening to the church. We had to find the ways of the church, and we had to get used to the church and things like that. And my woes with the church started then, because my father, he was not, he somehow got promoted, not from just being a church goer, but now he said that he had something called God's call. So what it meant was that he, at some point, he wanted to give up his secular job and become a full-time preacher in a church. So that's basically what he wanted to do. So that meant that he was very busy. He was suddenly recruited to become a big preacher. So every Sunday they would send him to a different place. So that's how, for all my growing years, my father was missing in action at home because he was busy building up a church in some other place. And I knew that my grandparents or my family was really not poor. They were not poor people by any stretch of imagination. But my father had a way of praying. He always, whenever he started praying, to this day he makes the same prayer. Oh God, you saved us from this wretched family. You saved us from this, like trying to just put down his family consistently is what he did. And we really didn't understand why my father, I always, because when we went to our village, we were like little queens. We had a cart, we had this, we had cattle, we had a plenty. But my father assumed a certain kind of narrative that he came from a very oppressed background, and he would pray that he came from an oppressed background, but God somehow saved him, and that's how he got this position and things like that. So even at that small age, I kind of saw the discrepancy of what he was wanting to kind of establish and what I was seeing as the reality of what our background was. And of course, this church was slowly, I started hearing stuff, and there were like things. I mean, the jokes were always about bashing up Christian Hindus, like these are people that worship idols and their hearts are like idols. Making fun of Brahmins, their tufts, and making fun of the way they looked was like a normal thing. It's like, but somehow I never. I mean, I could never relate to that. I just went there because I had to go, but I never really connected to that part of the church. So I had a certain view of what the church was, and outside the church, I knew what life was. So there was always this conflict in me that something about what this church is making me believe is not true. So I grew up, but the thing was, I could not talk much to my mother because my mother herself was clueless about what this church was. And my father was too busy. He didn't have time to initiate us into any church because he every day, every Sunday he was gone, and every evening he had to go and recruit people from the church, from the college hostels. So if I look back and think about it, all the Christianity, all the Christian stuff, even though he was the one who got converted and brought us to this church, all of the Christianity that I learned was what the Sunday school teachers were teaching or some preacher was teaching. And so it was really not an inquiry where I took the Bible and started reading and things like that. But slowly slowly I saw that the distance between my parents and my grandparents was slowly it was widening, because my father would kind of, he's not a harsh man, but he would pick on them about not doing this, not doing that. If you had to go to their family functions like marriages and all, he would dictate what kind of what should be done. There should not be any kind of Hindu symbolisms. You should not put rangoli, or you should not put toranams like the mango leaves or the marigold uh, flowers, jasmines. So if he had to go, it had to be to his liking, and to his liking was every kind of Hindu symbolism had to be gone. And so my grandparents initially, probably they resisted it, and there were like elders, my father's older brothers, younger brothers. There was a lot of friction, because what he was trying to push them to, while they didn't believe it, was something that they were not comfortable with. But I think they really didn't have a choice, because in some sense he was in a position of power. He had this big job in Hyderabad, and he was a very, very generous man. Like we would have people from all backgrounds come home. So they could not afford to antagonize him for two reasons: because he was genuinely helping them, and of course he was in a position of power. So he used that power pretty much to kind of wield these people into getting used to coming to the church. And he used to bring like people, the unemployed young boys from the village, and put them in there used to be what is called as ITI. I don't know if they still have in India. There's a technical 2-year courses that you could do for a trade school, and then you got a good job. So he slowly started building this group of people from the village that he was responsible for educating and put them in job. So this church, when we started, was very small, and it was like, okay, my father had the biggest group of people that he brought to this church. So he was the blue-eyed boy of the church. He was the foot soldier. They called him the right hand man of the church, of the pastor, because whatever the pastor wanted him to do, he would jump and do. If they said that you need to go and this Sunday night you have to go and preach there, he would just, at the drop of a hat, he could just take a train and go. And so his limelight in the church was, he had a larger than life image in the church, while my mother tried to kind of stay away. She just kept her distance. So the church kind of did not like to see that my mother was not too involved in the church. So at that time, the women in that church, they all used to go and like every evening they were supposed to go and pray in the church. But my mother was too busy with this big family, so she didn't have time for this. So they kind of antagonized her from the beginning. So they said that, oh, my father's name is Babura. Babura, you have great zeal for God, but your wife, she doesn't seem to have the right spirit. She's not godly. And so somehow that friction was always there in my family, where my father was seen as a very passionate, godly man, but a wife who's not cooperating, a wife who doesn't have what it takes to take off for my father to become this big preacher. But nevertheless, even though there was a friction outside, at home, I didn't see a lot of friction, because my father really could not pressurize my mother to do a lot of stuff, because she was taking care of this huge family, and her plate was full. So he could not antagonize my mother as much as the church would have loved to. So in that sense, we had an outside struggle, but inside the house we were okay. But anytime that this church would have big elders, they lived in Madras, and one of them was traveling internationally. So whenever these elders came, we were taken as a family, and my father would say, oh, I have God's call and I want to go to full-time ministry. And then my mother would sit next to them and she would be crying, and she would say, oh, I don't have faith for this. I cannot, I, even though my husband is saying all these things, I don't have faith. I mean, that was the only thing she could say. That was the lingo that she had to use. So they would just pray and say that, oh God, I mean, they would literally pray on her, say, making it appear like she's a weakling and she needed to kind of step up, and she's being a stumbling block in my father's way to take on this big church pastorship and things like that. So, but it just, even that didn't matter a lot, because domestically my father was working. So whenever we went to church, there was a friction, but inside the house we were okay. But every time some church elder came, we got this prominent position to go talk to them, because my father had this God's call and he wants to go serve God full time. Finally, when I was in my 10th grade, probably that's when they finally said, yeah, you keep saying that you have God's call, so you need to come for training to Chennai for a year or 6 months or whatever that is, because we need to start training you to put you in a full-time ministry. I just finished my 10th exams, and I was a pretty good student, and I was on top of almost, I was first in school, because I studied pretty hard. And but my father, that was a crucial time, because after 10th grade you needed to go to 11th grade, and it was a college experience. But my father was gone, he's not there. And my mother, who really didn't know much of how to do all these things, was stuck with three of us at home, and we were frequently falling ill. um, and the church people would come and visit and say, see, your husband has gone for God's work and you always hindered him, and that's why God is punishing you. So while my mother is taking the burden of raising all three of us children, with a husband who's gone, it still was not enough for this church. uh, any trouble that we had was because my father was trying to serve God and my mother was trying to pull him back. And at that point, I think that's pretty much when I kind of started getting into tiff with the church. I started becoming vocal, because now I wanted to protect my mother. My father was gone, and he would just come once in 3 months for a day, and he's gone. And she's being taunted by this church, and I had to step in at every point. And I would pick up fights with the people in the church, and I would say, "You cannot say this to my mother. You cannot say that." things to my family. And then they would just start preaching about our family in the church. Like they would say, oh, this brother has gone for ministry, but his wife and his children are not cooperating. We should uphold his brother in prayer. So that kind of stuff was going on. And finally, after 1 year, they released him. They said, okay, you can come back. uh, Instead of asking him to resign his job, I don't know, for some reason, they said that you can go and be in charge of a church. It was a place called Akivid, or remote village in West Godavari district, which is like 12 hours away in train. So they said, oh, you're going to be in charge of the church, because the person who was working in that church at that time, he had some allegations of sexually misbehaving with his congregation. So they kicked him out of the church. So my father had to go take over that church, which was still okay because it didn't disturb us. He went every Sunday, came back, so it didn't matter to us much. But all of these things kind of financially drained the family, because the church was not supporting any one of these things. He's going for training for 6 months to 12 months without pay, and his train charges, everything that he was doing in order to build the church, but not getting compensated for it. That was a financial burden, and of course there was an emotional burden, because my mother was just broken with all of these things, and she used to fall frequently ill. And even when, like, she could be dying tonight on a Saturday night, but if he had to go to church, he had to go to church. He would just dump all of us, and he would just make a prayer. Oh, I'm going to seek your kingdom first, and all things will be taken care of, so I know that my children will be safe. So even if there was a death in the family, he would not uh, stay back, because his commitment to church was that high. And then I moved on to my undergrad. So I had this great bitterness against church, but I never had any place to share it. I had some friends in school and in my intermediate, but these were not the kind of things that I could talk. After that, when I joined undergraduate, it was a very good college called St. Francis College. That's where I met a friend called Savita, and I could start sharing about what is happening in the church, and what are all the different difficulties we had. And I could just, till now, I really did not know who I was. I always was this conflict ridden person, always fighting the church, uh, trying to fend for my mother. And so I just really didn't know who I was as a person. And only after getting in touch with her, I just started to realize that there are different ways of looking at life, and different religious thoughts. Because whenever you lived in a Christian neighborhoods, or a kid's Christian thing, you're so far away from anything that is non-Christian, because we were not supposed to have Hindu friends. We cannot talk to Hindu friends. I still managed to have some friends, but not as much as I would wanted to kind of have a let out for what was happening in the church. And so those 3 years of my when I was doing my BSc, were like the best years. I just didn't care for the church enough. I said, they were doing what they were, and I would just go as needed, and not go if I didn't feel like going. But my father kept going, because he was gone every Sunday, so there was really not that much pressure on us to behave, uh, to monitor us. So, but finally, my father, the year that I finished my BSc, he decided that he wanted to take a transfer. He kept trying every year to move to that small village, but every year he would try, he would not get a transfer. But he actually got a government transfer to move to that village. And that just that move to that village, just at a time when academically we were supposed to be somewhere else. I just finished my undergrad. One of my younger brothers finished his first year intermediate. The the youngest one was just entered 10th grade, and we know those were very crucial times academically, but nothing mattered for my father. He just packed us up and he said, we're leaving, and then just we left, like it didn't matter to our relationships, what was happening to us academically. I don't even know if he even thought about that. His thing was, I wanted to go and work in that place full time, and I kept trying for it, and it just didn't happen. Or whenever it happened, he jumped on it and he took us there. And that 1 year was like torture for me. I just didn't know where I was. I just lost control of life. I'm from this vibrant so, uh, college life. I was put into this village, and I protested. I even though he went there to preach in that church and become the pastor of that church, I refused to go. I said, I'm not coming to this church. And but slowly, after a year, the only things during that time that kept me sane probably were the letters that Savita used to write to me. And I used to read a lot of books. Any book that I found, I read. So those were the things that kept me sane. So this was a year, and something happened to my father's job in that place. His transfer was a mistake, and so they said, you have to go back. So he could not come back to Hyderabad because it was very competitive at that time. So he had to come back to a place called Khammam. So even though he was waiting to get to this to village to become this full-time pastor, somehow it didn't work out. So he had to come back to Hyderabad. He had to come back to this place called Khammam to start to after a year. And that's when I went to Kakatiya University to study my master's. And staying away after all of what I had been through, staying away in the hostel by myself in Warangal, that was the best thing that happened to me, because I just didn't have any interference from the church. And my uncle's family lived there. There was the same church there, but there was no pressure on me. And I just thought that yes, life is back on track. I was going to study, I was going to do well, and I'm just going to get away from this church. I knew that I had to get away from this church, but I didn't know how. And my father's younger brother was a professor in a medical college there, and he was very close to me. He was a man who cared a lot for us, and he knew, even though he also got initiated into the church, but he knew where church ended and family started, unlike my father, for whom church, family, everything was kind of blended in. So I was probably 22 years old, and he would just come. He would I mean, at that time, people knew me there, and there were like a lot of people coming and asking him, okay, your brother's daughter is here. Are they looking for any marriage proposals for her? And so he never dared to ask my dad to see if he would be interested to get me married off. So he would go and talk to my mother. Like they call her Udinamma. So are we going to get the girl married off? My mom would go and taunt, oh, she's already 22, 23, it's time to get married. My father would be furious. He would like, what are you talking about? How can, she's just 23, what are you talking about getting married off? Even if you're getting married off, that is not something that we are going to decide and do. The church gets to do it. Brother Joe is the one who's going to decide. This brother Joe happens to be the church elder that I hardly knew. So apparently he was supposed to fix my marriage. But in any case, I myself was not too keen about this marriage. I was studying, and I wanted to go get a career. So I was really not interested anything that was happening. Uh, s- uh, I was not focused at all. While this was happening and everything career wise, I was doing well in my education, and I was studying, and I had a I was looking forward to going and working, and I had to go and do a project work in Hyderabad at that time. And I established back my connection with Savita, because now I was closer home and I had freedom to travel back and forth. And I was just she would get worried about it, because she saw how our life was tossed because of the church. She would just keep telling me, like, how are you going to come out of this church, Mary? I was like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about that. She said, oh, what about your marriage? She would be more worried about my marriage than I was. I said, what are you talking about marriage, Savita? I'm not getting married anytime soon. So, and suddenly one day she said, why don't you think about this? Do you think you want to marry my brother? I said, what? You want me to marry your brother? Are you out of your mind? You know, I'm a Telugu Christian. You know what my dad was, and you people are Brahmins, and your brother, I mean, he's the most stuck up man I have seen. You're just out of your mind. And she just laughed and she said, oh, I was just joking. Just, you seem to be too caught up with this. In any case, so these were the kind of conversations I had, but as fate would have it, I lost her to an accident. She was 23 years old. I was just about to finish my master's to move on to work in Hyderabad. And her death did it for me because she was the only one who knew what I was going through as a person in the church. And when she died, it's like a part of me was gone. I just didn't know who to look up to, how to get out of this mess of this church. And her loss was tremendous for me. And fast forward, not going into too many details, 8 months after, within her passing, I got married to her brother. So probably what brought us together could have been a common loss. And this had nothing to do with fighting the church or nothing. It was just my personal turmoil that brought me closer to him. And we got married without, of course, he did everything. He came and talked to my parents. And there was another talk that I gave a while ago. And there was these details are in the talk, and probably will upload that in this link here. But the church saw it as a big, probably I was one of those people that despised the church. They saw it that I was walking away from here, from their control, and it was a war. They took my marriage to a non-Christian or a Hindu as a war against the church. And of course, for them, it was always my mother that they had to blame. So the entire church and the relatives, because by now my father had enough relatives whom he converted and made part of this church. So they kind of taunted her to such an extent that the poor lady could not physically take it. She became so sick and she developed an autoimmune disorder. Even though I got married and went off, my heart was still with my family. I just loved them, especially my mother. To me, she's almost like a daughter to me. Even though the roles switched, I had to protect her at any cost. I knew what the church would do to her, and her relatives. Even though she helped a lot of relatives, I knew that the church, the relatives, would eat her alive. So I would. Even though I got married and went away, every month, every week, I would come running back home just to be with her. And at the same time, she also lost her brother. And once I and Suresh were together, we kind of took control over of my younger brothers, trying to get them educated. And then we moved to the US. And when I moved to the US, my brothers moved with me. And there was really not much interference from the church because we really didn't have anything to do with the church once I got married and moved out. And my brothers also moved out. My father was doing his own thing in the church. So I thought, okay, I think we are done with this church. This Christianity thing was done. I think we're past this. But then when my brothers were getting married again, we had the same nonsense because for my father, not marrying a girl from the church was as good as marrying a Hindu girl. So for both my brothers' marriages, my father had another round of wars because the church wanted to push their agenda, but we were fighting it back, saying that the boys were saying that no, we don't want to marry anybody from the church. But anyway, both my brothers got married and they kind of moved away from the church. And for I think the best part of of our family was once both my brothers got married and moved to the US, and we were here, and my parents would visit us regularly, and they would take care of us, and they would it just didn't look like church was part of anything at all. So it almost looks like we completely washed off our hands of this church influence. And like 6 months they would come and stay with me. And but my father had a lot of reservations about how my house was, because when he came in, he could not handle any kind of Hindu symbolisms in my own house, and I was very sensitive about that. So I kind of kept the house careful to not give him discomfort, or even for my mother, I could not give them any discomfort. So both my parents, when they came here, the house looked like a Christian house for all practical purposes. It's not that we had any Christian rituals going on, but there was really no Christian Hindu symbolism. And Suresh was very easygoing with this. So, so this was probably, uh, I think what we didn't realize was that my father was still hooked on to the church, and it was hard for him to let go. Uh, when he visited here in 2014, probably that was he came to help us with my travel and with my work. He wanted to go meet the church elder, and he said, I wanted to go meet the church elder who lived in Michigan at that time. And we don't know what happened, what conspired there. So he went and met the church elder, and then they went back. And after 3 months, they went back to India. And once he went back to India, he suddenly decided one day that he wanted to. The church has called him for a full-time ministry again. Like I had no clue to even how to handle this. My mother is calling me over the phone and crying. She's saying dad is all now wanting to go to a full-time ministry again, so someplace in Nalgonda or someplace he wants to go, and I don't know what to do now. And then all the past of the church came back again. It's again, this woman need to be protected. So what I thought was over was not over. The nightmare was still on. But now I started taking the church head on. I wanted to find out, because I left off about this church, but I went ahead and dug in, and I wanted to know their operations. I did a lot of work uh, trying to find out about the church. I gathered there a lot of information. There was a lot of mismanagement with funds, and there were sexual abuse cases, what else and what not. I mean, and I started this huge blog, and a lot of people contributed to that blog, and people used to write anonymously about this church, and I started exposing it to such an extent that they figured that uh, somebody told me that their income was cut to half because of what I did, because people started walking away from the church after reading this blog. Like lakhs and lakhs of people were reading this blog, and they had to put a stop to this somehow, because uh, how are they going to, they had to establish a motive behind why I was doing so much against the church. So again, they called my father in, and they got a confession out of him. They asked him, why is it that your daughter is so upset about this church? And apparently my father told them, yeah, my daughter and my son-in-law are really upset because uh, I was we used to travel to US frequently to take care of their children. We were like their servants. Now that we can't go and take care of their children, my daughter and my son-in-law are upset, and that's why they're doing all this. And of course, that was a good excuse for them. So now we were on all church, like again, we became the talk of the town for that church. I was a Hindu terrorist. I was an RSS agent. I was whatnot. My husband was a terrorist. So they kind of went berserk on us. And I said, you know what? All these years, I didn't even think about what religion to follow, what ways to follow. My only motive was to keep my parents comfortable. And I have done it at the expense of not finding out the truth for myself, nor allowing my children to take on any spiritual path. So while this fight was going on with the church, I had to find out the truth for myself. And I called the church elder, and the lady told me, uh, you think that your dad is the reason you see so much conflict in church, in your family, is because, as the Bible is saying, Jesus came to this world to create war and not to give you peace. And your father will be against father against mother, mother against daughter, son against father. This is very natural. This is what the true Christianity is. So here is the Bible verse that kind of establishes that. So this was the Bible verse that was thrown at my face, saying that the reason you see so much confusion in your family is because your God, your father is truly following God, and this war that you see in your family is what Jesus intended on your family, because he is a true servant of God. That's basically what I was told by the church. In any case, all of these things that happened made me started to think, like, I've never really read the Bible for what it is. I had to go back to the source, because all of these confusing messages that I was getting, even though I fought the church, but I still had a doubt that the church was not really as bad as I thought it was. It must have been probably I never really understood the role of God, of Jesus, or whatever it is. So I started reading Bible one by one, and yes, the pattern that I saw was the entire confusion in my family and the alienation that we had from our roots, from our culture, from our heritage, was by a design. It was by a design according to the Bible. And why is it that my father hated his own background? What was it that made him disown his own heritage? And here is a Bible verse for those of you who are able to see. Okay, let me share the screen. So this is what is called as ancestral sin. So what was the sin of my ancestors that was passed on to us? The sin of worshiping the idols. So my father, or anybody who becomes a Christian, is now under the curse of what is called as generational sins. Generational sins are sins that the person inherits from his forefathers. And in case of an Indian, the only sin, the biggest sin, was that your forefathers were idol worshippers. So that means you had to somehow disconnect from that heritage. Uh, and you have to disown that heritage, and you have to you have to kind of act like the life just started off with you and you had no roots whatsoever. Because if you were to talk anything about, have any kind of connection with your ancestors or your forefathers or anything like that, it is as good as you still have connection with that devil or Satan and things like that. So this alienation from family, this alienation from culture, this alienation from where we came from, was all by the design of the church. Or it was not by the design of the church, but it was actually driven by the Bible verses. And it's not just that. If you there are other kinds of sins, like sins that you're born with, sins that you do, like everything. So this image that you are born a sinner and you had to redeem yourself, and in order for you to redeem yourself, you have to give up your family, you have to give up your connection with your past, with your forefathers, any heritage that you have. This was all driven by what is written by in the Bible. And there are many verses that justify that. I'm not going to go into those details. But the reason I share all of these things is we were a family that grew up together. It's not that, I mean, some of you might come to a conclusion that I came from, I mean, I had a very depressed life, but no, we were a very close knit family. My I took care of my brothers like they were my own sons. My brothers were with me for the most part through all of this journey. But once I started speaking against Christianity itself, they could not handle that. They quickly started cutting off relationships. They had to walk away from anything that had like they were cautious. They started being cautious. I cannot really say that they walked away from us, but this kind of breaking up of family into fragments, even when there are gentler relationships, you have like there are relationships between grandfather and grandchildren, there are relationship between nieces, nephews, uncles and aunts, but all of these things did not matter, because when you assume that Christian identity, that to protect your identity as a Christian, you could virtually walk away from any other relationship you had. And I kept thinking about it and I said, if India as a country has people that wanted to convert people into Christianity. Remember, they didn't have any relationship with the people that they wanted to convert. Their agenda was to have a Christian community. So, what is happening in the family? What kind of conflict is happening? They're not cognizant of that. They don't even care. It is an agenda. The agenda is for them to to make this to make this world pretty much a Christian world. Okay, but if you look back on it and think about it, like what is the purpose of making it a Christian world? Then the economics come in place. My father may have worked for 45 years in a government job, and every month 10% of his income went to church. Many people have the misconception that a lot of money is coming from outside India to promote evangelical activities. Most people are not aware that a lot of money is internally generated, that money that is unaccounted for. This particular church that my family was part of, they have properties all over India, in all prime cities, in big places. But they never gave membership to a single person. There is no proof, even with all the association that my father had with this church. My father or we cannot officially accomplish or establish a relationship with that church. And how, so that means all of the money that we gave to the church is we have no clue where it went. We have no claim on it, and there's no record that we gave this much money, even though we know that every single one of us gave so much money. So whenever a person like me walks out of this Christian fold, they see it as a threat, because I know way too many secrets. I know where the money is coming from, what are the dark past that they have. So they, in a Christian world today, I'm an enigma. There are a lot of people that know me as a Christian, and now when they see me in a different light, they're all praying, like they're all wishing that according to their Bible philosophies, I should have been perished long time ago, because I chose to walk away from church and I chose to disobey God. And the reason I chose this is because I was incapable of leading a holy life, right? Because Christianity is the only way you can lead a holy life. So I walked away from that. So there are people wishing that something happens to me, and they're all waiting, because if their God is true, there was really no way for me to have the kind of life I'm having. So it is, they cannot wrap their minds around the fact that I seem to be having a happy life. And of course, some of them, people that are kinder. Probably they pray that at some point I get converted back and just be part of their gang to go to heaven. But there are others that are just waiting to see my downfall at some point. They want to see so that they can make an example of it, right? How do I establish that a person who walked away from Christianity is doing it at the expense of destroying her own self? And if nothing else happens, if even if they don't see me suffer in this world, I walked away from this great opportunity to become part of heaven. Heaven was just few steps away, but I chose to walk away from it. So the Christian world, I mean, right now, whenever I upload my videos or when I put some information publicly, unrelated people that I don't even know these people, they're all coming to judge me. Some of those comments are very crude. Some of them are at a level of personal abuse, because their God has to be true. If their faith is true, there is really no way that I can exist the way I'm existing. So while some are praying that uh, God brings me great punishment, there are others that are praying that I get back on the track to become a Christian again. While that is going on, I moved on with my own personal journey of trying to look for answers for my what is the reason for my existence, where do I belong in this big scheme of things. And a lot of people helped me in this path. My husband has been patient with me to support me in this journey. My brother-in-law and my parents-in-law helped me a lot. And I'm part of an organization called IHAR. They generously accepted me, and I would be amiss if I don't mention Dr. Subratoji, who is my mentor. He's and Dr. Main, and these are the people that gave me a new perspective. I learned a lot of things from them. These are the big brothers I needed when I was going through the rough times that I had gone through in the church. But I'm glad that I found a home in the Hindu community that has been so generous with generous, and they've supported. And I'm very active in Facebook, sharing my ideas, sharing my views, giving insights. And I've never, the kind of abuse that I faced in church, even while I was trying to please them, was something that I cannot even mention, because it hurts my self-respect even to acknowledge those things. I'll just give you a few examples. My brother, who lives in Chicago, we used to visit him quite often, and then he was part of a church. I don't even know these people. Because he was going to a church, just out of respect for him on a Christmas morning, I just went to the church. A lady pulls me aside and she says, "Hey, I heard that you married a Hindu man, and you grieved God so much. God is going to bring you great punishment. So I hope you know that. You need to be thinking about that and praying." I mean, like random people who have now, I have no connection with these people, could come and say such things to me. I would happily go and take my children to church whenever I was in Hyderabad, because my parents were going. So I didn't have any hang up. So I just went. And then people would pick on my sons and like, "Oh, your name is Shreyas? Your name is Neeraj? Huh. From being John and Peter, you from having brothers whose names were John and Peter, you have sons names Shreyas and Neeraj. What a fall!" I mean, that is the kind of hatred that I was exposed to, which was never the case with any relationships that my husband's family side or his friends in the Hindu community had. But still, we lived in a delusion that the Christian path is the only path that is going to take me to heaven. And I was supposed to believe that I had to stay in this path so that my husband also could join me in heaven. And I always joke, even in this world, for this 30-40 years itself, I could not put up with you. Imagine being stuck in heaven with all of you for eternity. But that was it's an exciting journey, and I learned a lot of stuff, and I made more enemies than friends, but it was worth the journey. And I think I'm going to stop here. And if any of you have any questions, I can take those.
I studied from Wesley College, Secunderabad,
Oh, okay.
and we had three sections, and one section was reserved for only Christians. And I had many friends who used to follow many concepts of Hinduism, like putting the tika on the forehead, and many things they were just putting the half name as Christian, half name as Hindu. And I also got the offer for conversion, but I did not do. Just I wanted to share because
Okay.
this Wesley College, you might have heard, that was the Wesley College in Secunderabad near Paradise.
Correct. I know that. Yes.
So I have been
See,
graduation from there.
okay. See, there are certain Christian Christian institutions that just changed the God, but they kept all the Hindu traditions. So that Wesley's church that you call as CSI Church, that was one of them. So you would not not even know that they were not Hindus because they followed every ritual. But this particular church that my father was part of was an evangelical church. So they fought the Hindu symbolism. They had to completely destroy it.
Yes, sir. I'm Prithvi here.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, first of all, it's been a great pleasure listening to you. I follow you regularly on Facebook. I rarely log into Facebook, and whenever I log into Facebook, I just go to your page to see what is up. Thank you. Your journey has been like very inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you.
I kind of got to you from Karunakar Suguna Garu
Okay.
and Paul Esther Johnson.
Okay.
My question is, for one Christian to come out of this thing, it requires so much of like say effort, everything. But going into it is so easy, and I see like thousands are joining in. So for every person to come out is such a monumental effort, but to go in is so easy. So when this is the case, is it kind of a lost cause?
To get people back is what you're saying.
Get
It is
people
very
back.
it is very hard. It is extremely hard for people to come out of Christianity, because there of what happens is once you become a Christian, you kind of cut off relationship with the external world. So the world outside is alien to you. You don't know how to relate, and you not only that, you start antagonizing every relationship that you had before this. So even if you have some trouble and you want to go back, you don't know where to start off. At what point will you enter the mainstream society? For my case, it was easy because my husband, they were Hindus, so I kind of knew where I belonged in the big scheme of things. But that the fear of where do I get started back again is I think that is the biggest trouble.
Mary J, thank you so much. This was one of my probably one of the first talks I've heard about. What we call Gharvapsi, really. But want to congratulate you for your fight and also your personal sacrifice. You, your husband, your children. I mean, it's not an easy journey for sure. It's mentally draining. I congratulate you for all that.
Thank you so much.
One question I have, really, I mean, it's an observation plus I hope you can answer it in some detail. Well, not in detail, but some understanding. Over a period of time, I've read books. I mean, starting from the Greeks and even the Britishers when they came. One of your comments, when you go to the church, you said that when you were younger, they said that they would say, "Oh, they don't worship idols, this, that," and also for some reason, they keep on bringing the Brahmin community. In the church also, those Brahmins are this, the Brahmins are that. It seems to be a very common theme, right? And so, do you have any comment? Even Macaulay said that. So many people have said that before. Keep this community away, right? So even you said that when you went to the church, oh, that used to happen. I'm just curious. Is there a reason behind it for this particular abuse?
I'm thinking it's because those are the only ones that had a full understanding of what the religion entails and also the way of preserving it. Because others probably did not have a way of preserving it with with books and literature and things like that. Maybe they only had oral cultures and oral traditions, but not much of the textual evidence of how to protect it. So probably that's why they wanted to antagonize that community.
It was a very inspiring talk, and thanks for sharing your story. But I was keen to know how you said that until 2014 you didn't really have anything, any Hindu symbols in your house, right? So I would love to we'd love to know more about how you started practicing Hindu rituals, and what was the motivation for that, and how did you do that?
See, the thing was, there are two things to it, right? One is not having Hindu symbolisms doesn't mean that I didn't have any knowledge of Hinduism. But it was, even though I knew all the traditions, to make a public of that was the trouble. Because if I made public of my Hindu identity, that is going to alienate my parents from me. So, I mean, I knew Suresh used to have his idols and like have worship, and the boys always went to temple. But whenever they came in, I mean, probably it's really not that I was not influenced by Hinduism at all until 2014, but publicly acknowledging that I'm now wanting to embrace this Hindu identity happened only after 2014.
I have a question, Mary Ji. So, having been raised in an entire background of sort of hating idol worship and all, how do you deal with Murti Puja now? Are you comfortable? Are you agnostic? Or?
See, for me too, probably it took me some time. Rationally, I knew that there was nothing wrong with this, right? That's the way you connect to divinity and all those things. But there was a lurking fear. For instance, I mean, it's kind of silly to even acknowledge this, but if I'm going to a temple and I would say, oh my God, what happens if something happens to us and some accident might happen? God might, I mean, so there is this idea of Christian God trying to watch you all the time, trying to catch you doing something wrong. So it almost like I'm sneakily trying to get out of this Christian God and go to a Hindu temple. So something might happen to me, right? So that was a very irrational fear, but that fear was very real. And it took me a lot of time to get out of that.
You had a very difficult and tough time. I hope your future will be much more pleasant. Maybe you have taken a decision what to do and what not to do. Okay, ma, tell me, what exactly drives these people to convert others to their way of thinking? I mean, you got Protestant, Catholic, you use the word evangelist. Now, what exactly is driving these people to convert people and keep them in that, what do they say, flock?
See, a Christian genuinely believes that if you're not a Christian or if you don't come into this fold, you're going to go to hell. Okay, but let's think about it like this. Okay, the foot soldiers are the people that are inspired by this. They're completely bought into this ideology. But the people who actually make the agenda, the top people, they know that none of this is true. They're doing it just for money. But the ones that have got converted into it and they are trying to propagate Christianity, they believe with their whole being that their relatives are going to go to hell. So, and they feel this burden to save them from that. They don't think it is as an agenda. The foot soldiers are never aware of the bigger picture at all.
Yes, so yeah, this is Sriram. Actually, we are friends on Facebook. Okay, so I wanted to know. See, I have heard your talks and everything. So anyway, I have a lot of questions, but I'll just ask you one question. See, in one of your talks, you said that you liked Advaita Vedanta a lot. So from Christianity to Advaita Vedanta, I mean that's a very big jump according to me. So how did you get into it? If you can give a brief answer, I would be happy to.
That is because of what my husband and my brother-in-law and reading books, and that's how I got introduced to it. See, another big thing for me that was the big turning point was not having the feminine deity. That is something that fascinated me in Hinduism, because in Christianity the demonizing of the women is at a different level, and it's very subtle, but it's there. The women are seen as, I mean, if like I said, I narrated so much about my mother. So my mother is that representation of the woman who's the reason for the downfall of the man. So I have seen that there is always this antagonizing of women that happen in many subtle ways, and so it extended. So God, who is a male figure according to Bible, I had to just move on to seeing God in a feminine form, and from there formless and things like that.
Jai Shri Ram, Mary garu.
Jai Shri Ram andi.
Bagunnara? I have a very quick question. People who come out of Christianity or from out of a particular church in particular, they are seen as threat, no doubt, but will they not attack, or will they not is there no procedure like throwing fatwa to attack them, or to do some harm to them in Christianity?
See, that doesn't happen as much. What really happens is, from my example, at least, if you see, I came out of Christianity from this particular church, but my parents were still part of that church, right? And they're shamed endlessly, but they don't have the courage to walk out of there. The shaming is like, for instance, my parents kept the relationship with me intact, especially my mother. But whenever they went to church, they kind of had to be apologetic about keeping up with me still. And that pressure, at some point, you succumb to it, because if you're too attached to your family, you say, okay, that's okay, let me go back to the church. So there is more of an emotional pressure than the physical hurting, the threat of physically hurting people. There are more mind games played than physically threatening to hurt people.
My question was more related to what attracts people to Christianity at the time of conversion. I mean, a lot of times we see that there are allurements, but one of the things which goes in my mind is that it is more than the allurement. It is also the simplicity of the message of salvation, that you just join and you have a road to heaven and things like that. Is that one thing which attracts people, because the message is very simple for people to understand and follow?
Yeah, see, one is simplicity, and generally, if you see, the feeling of belonging to a group is also very strong when you get converted into Christianity. You just get this feeling that you're part of a bigger group, and there is a group watching you. There is a group that is that you can count on, and that kind of stuff too. So the moment you enter into a church, it's like it acts like everybody in the church has been waiting for you to show up, right? It's the welcoming, they would check on you, they would feed you if you're hungry, they would I mean, it's a different level. I don't think many of us even can match 10% of what they do.
What's the role of the maybe one or two more questions? What's the role of the Hindu society in the caste system in conversions to Christianity, if you have any opinion on that? These are questions coming from other people. So on
Okay.
chat.
Okay. See, whenever you talk about the caste system is the boogeyman that Christianity has used for conversion all the time, right? Like for instance, what I said was, my father always felt like the reason he got converted into Christianity because he was not treated well by some caste that is above him, and that's why he had to find God somewhere else. But in reality, that is really not the case. These are families that really never had any spiritual tradition to begin with, and that's why it is so easy to convert them. But while they make you believe that because of their particular caste they could not get entry into temples, that's why they went and started looking for of all times. There's not one Christian who tells you who has gone through that journey to become a Christian. It's not like he wanted to find God and he went to temple and they denied him and that's why he went to church. That's where he found God. No person has gone looking for God and knocked on church and found God there. They came knocking on his door. And then, of course, once you become a Christian, to explain, there is a culture called giving testimony, right? You have to tell why you became a Christian, and these stories get generated at that point.
Very interesting. What's your opinion on Jesus? Isn't he the one you're supposed to be following as a Christian? That's
Yes.
coming in. Okay, so you have an opinion on Jesus and teachings, I guess that's the question.
So if you talk about Jesus, there are three things that if you want to accept Jesus as the God, there are three things, right? You have to believe in virgin birth, and he died because of whatever social reasons, but he died for your sins, and then he raised again from the dead. These are the three things. These are scientifically not viable. Probably dying on the cross and changing that's a different thing, but born of a virgin and then being risen from the dead, this is just 2000 years ago. This is not long ago, right? So these are the two things that are very hard to believe, or they're not rational in thinking. I mean, those are not anything scientific. But the best part is, while Christians believe in these kinds of stories and fiction, they're always trying to say that Hinduism is all about superstition. But is believing that a child is born of a virgin not superstition? So the personality of, there may have been a historical figure called Jesus. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I don't think I will deny that there is a person called Jesus ever existed in history. I don't think that is something that we cannot establish. But all of these other stories of how he came about and all those things, those are all just stories.
So there's one probably last question. As per Bible, the kingdom of God is meant for 144,000 Jews. Then why do you go after non-Jews? I don't know the theology, but just put it out for you.
That is the biggest thing, right? Nowhere in the Bible, if you look the entire Bible, right, nowhere in the Bible you will see that this God is the God of the entire humanity or entire universe or anything. This God is God of Israel. And he says it several times. Even Jesus himself said that I came to save the lost in the Israelites. And it is later, Saint Paul is the one who kind of extended this message. So all of these Christians today believe that they have now become the chosen Israelites.
Okay, one last point. Why do so many Brahmins convert to Christianity?
Oh boy. Probably it is, like I said, maybe it's because of a certain regimented way people follow, especially if you're a Brahmin, then you have a lot more rules than others, isn't it? So probably there are some people that are disgruntled with that, and they are the ones that are that are moving away. But do you think a lot of Brahmins? I don't believe that there are a lot of Brahmins, but enough. And remember, if a Brahmin if anybody like from those backgrounds converted, they may have been the dumbest people in this rung, but they would be the smartest people when you enter the church. You get so much limelight. You're the star.
So you have a strong will and reason to get converted to Hinduism. Okay. Many Hindus who got converted to Christianity because of various factors. Now, most of them are feeling frustration. Such people who are feeling frustrated there, how can they get back to Hinduism? What kind of strong will they should have? What kind of driving force they must have? Well, how do you advise them to get back to Hinduism?
See, a lot of people that are frustrated with Christianity, I don't think they're logically trying to convert into Hinduism. They want to get out of Christianity, that's fine. But here is another thing that I have seen. People who walked away from Christianity are caught in a different kind of mess. They got out of Christianity because it was too rigid, too many rules and things like that. So when they walk out of Christianity, they actually embrace a life where there are no rules. And the sudden freedom of no fear of God, because till yesterday they were afraid that they will be thrown to hell. But now when you walk away and deny that Christian path, you're not afraid of hell or heaven anymore. So you're just living what is a very, I don't want to say immoral life, but it alludes to that extent, right? So coming out of Christianity is one thing, but finding Hinduism as an alternative is a totally different thing. And for that, you have to have somebody who guides you. A friend, somebody has to guide you. I don't think everybody who walks out of Christianity is has a logical path to walk into Hinduism.